Today's daf we're going to be learning is Ketubot daf pei. This is the daf for Shabbat. We're going to start at the Mishnah at the bottom of Ayin Tet Amud Bet. So the Mishnah starts, Hamotzi otzaot al nichsei ishto. We're talking about usufruct property. That is nichsei melog. This is property the woman brings in, usually from an inheritance or something like that, brings it into the marriage or part of her dowry. The husband returns it as is at the end, but he has rights to plan, to invest, to do what he wants with it, and all the proceeds go to him while they're married. Now, what happens if the marriage ends and hotzi harbe v'achal kim'ah? He put a lot of money into it, and he only took out, though, a little bit. In other words, he didn't stay married long enough to really benefit. Or kim'ah v'achal harbe, he put in a little, but took a lot out. In other words, there were a lot of proceeds, even though he invested very little. It really doesn't matter. Masha hotzi hotzi, masha achal achal. Whatever he spent, he can't get that money back anymore. And whatever he enjoyed, and that's it. Once the marriage is over, it's a total disconnect. He doesn't get reimbursed for anything he spent. However, hotzi v'lo achal, in the event where he put money in and he didn't benefit at all, then yishava kama hotzi, he has to swear exactly what his expenses were, v'yitol, and he gets his expenses back. But only if he swears. Why? Because nobody really knows how much he spent, and he could theoretically lie and no one would know. So therefore, he has to swear. That's a preventative method to prevent him from lying. V'kama kim'ah. So now the Gemara starts off with questions. When it says, if you ate even just a little bit, how much is that little bit? Amar Rav Asi, afilu grogeret achat. Even one fig would be enough. V'hu sha'achala derech kavod. But only if you ate it in a respectable manner, meaning if you were just nibbling in the field, that doesn't count. If you ate it in a respectable way, then that counts as significant. Rabbi Abba Amr Beirav afilu shigra ditmari. Even a cluster of dates, that's enough to be considered, right? He has a different amount, a cluster of dates, that's considered a respectable amount. By Rav Bibi. Now, Rav Bibi asked the following question. Chuvtza ditamre. If you had if you took the dregs of the dates that you used when you were making the beer, what's the halacha? Is this enough for us to say that he benefited? Okay, if he took that, 1 second, I just want to check one thing, right? There's two different options. One is that it was like a dough of smushed up dates, which is what you use to make the beer. And it's kind of, a little disgusting to eat. There's some different interpretations what this is. So what's the halacha? And the Gemara answers take. We don't know the answer. Okay, that's already a little bit difficult to figure out. Lo achala derech kavod man. What if he didn't eat it in a respectful way and he ate it in the field? So at a certain point, though, let's say he eats a lot, it would already be considered significant. So where do we draw the line? Amar ula pligi batchei amorai b'ma'arava. Israel, there were two amoraim who debate at this point. Chad amar b'ki isar, the value of an isar's worth of food, of fruits. V'chad amar b'ki dina. Okay, it's a financial amount of how much he benefited. Whatever it might be, if he benefited that amount, that would be enough. Amrei Dayana to Pupadita, the judges in Pupadita said, Rashi says that's Rav Papa Bar Shmuel. Avid Rav Yehuda uvda b'chavilei zmorot. Okay, Rashi explains to us, what are we talking about here? These are the stalks. Okay, the stalks of whatever it might be is the food for the animals. It's fodder. Okay, that's the stuff only the animals eat. So now, Rashi even says it's machal pilim, okay? It's food that generally you feed elephants, okay, all the stalks. So if you give the stalks to the animals, then that's already considered that you benefited, even though you yourself didn't benefit from it, but just giving it to your animals is enough to be considered benefit. Rav Yehuda l'tameh, he goes according to something where he's consistent within his opinion. To Amar Rav Yehuda, elsewhere he says, achala, okay, now, before we even start reading, let me explain some background. The topic that we're quoting Rav Yehuda is a totally different topic. It's about chazaka. What is chazaka? We're going to learn it in the 3rd chapter of Bava Batra when we get there, a few years. What happens? If you live in a field or in a house, or you're using, you either live in your house, a house, or you're working a field and you've been taking all the produce from it for 3 years, even if you don't have a contract saying I bought it, you can claim rights to it as long as no one complained. If no one complained for 3 years that you were on this property, you have rights to that property. The assumption is if you weren't the rightful owner, the owner would have complained. Now, what does it mean in a field? You're not living there. So it means that you've been eating the produce. Now, what if it's a field with all orla, which is fruits? The first 3 years, you can't eat the fruits. Or kilaim, where it's got cross. You have vines mixed with grains, and you can't eat it or benefit from it. Or shvi'i, where it's Shemitah year, let's say, is one of those years. Obviously, it can't be 3 years of Shemitah year, but one of those 3 years is a Shemitah year, and the fruits are hefker that year. No one can claim, right, that, oh, I didn't stop you. The owner could say, because anyone could eat. It was Shemitah. So those 3 years, if you ate one of the 3 years, or all of the 3 years, you ate orla or shvit or kilaim. Now, according to the majority of people interpret this, that what we're talking about is you ate the stalks and all that. Now, the stalks don't have a law of orla, only the fruits do. And the kilaim also, it's only the fruits that come out of it, or the food that grows, not the stalks. And Shemitah also, the hefker is about the fruits, right? Your whole tree and the branches and all that isn't hefker. So if you took the chavilez morot, okay, the part that was for the animals, and you fed them from that, the owner didn't complain for 3 years, harezo chazaka. So what do you see here? Rav Yehuda, just like in the case of chazaka, it's the same logic as he has by the husband getting benefit from it, but that's enough to be considered benefit, even though it's not from the actual fruits themselves. Now we have a case. This is going to be interesting. We've talked many times about a case where the woman could do meal. If she was married only by rabbinic law, her brother or her mother married her off to this man, she can any moment walk out and say, I'm done. I don't want to be married until she gets to the age of 12 or 12 and a bit. So what happens? She goes into this marriage. He knows that she might leave the marriage any day. Right? In the other case where he leaves the marriage, it's up to him to leave the marriage. In this case, she could just do it. So now he gets her property and he wants to invest in it, but he's not going to invest so much because, right, it's not in his best interest, because he doesn't know. Maybe she'll wake up the next morning. How much money am I going to put into it? So the rabbis made an exception to the rule in this case. And they said, it's as if they're using someone else's property. Okay. It's like investing in someone else's property. If I invest in your property, I'll get my money back. If the deal is over, right, I'll be able to get my money back. So this whole thing with the wife is because it's got this unique status of it, but he will get his money back. My time, Abdu Rabbanan. So what's the reason? Abdu Rabbanan takanta. What's the issue? Number one, we want him to invest. That's first. He might not, it's not worth his while to invest if he knows she might walk out of the marriage. So what they say, whatever you invest, you'll get back. Even if you benefit a little bit. Remember, the Mishnah said if you benefit a little bit, you get nothing back when the marriage is off. In this case, you will. The second issue is that maybe you'll invest, but if you're married in this kind of marriage, which might be a very short-term marriage, you might invest in a way that there's different ways to invest. You can invest for short-term gain and you can invest for long-term gain. And when you're talking about a field, for example, there's a way to plant in a way that you don't tire out the field. If you plant all over the place, right, you might get a huge crop this year, but next year your field's going to suffer. So you're going to plant in a way that he might plant for the short-term gain because of the situation, because he knows he might not be married to her next year. So therefore, they want to prevent that from happening because that will ultimately ruin the field, and we want to protect the woman's field. So because of that, and if we want to protect it, number one, we want him to invest in it. Number two, we want him to invest in the long-term gain. And therefore, we're going to make an exception to the rule and allow him to get his money back in full if the marriage is in fact off. There was a woman, we're not going to have a case. She inherited 400 zuz. What was the problem? It was in Beit, which comes up in many stories. It's a place that's very far from mainland Babylonia. Azil Gavra, Afik Shit Meh. Her husband went. He had to spend 600 zuz to get her 400 zuz back. So he invested 600 in order to get her 400, right? Not the smartest investment. Aite Arba Meh. So he brings back the 400. before he gets back, he ran out of money. He needed one more zuz to make his journey back, and he takes it from her 400. Ata the kamed to Rabbi Ami. So he goes in front of Rabbi Ami. Amrale. Rabbi Ami says, "What can I do? He already gained benefit from her 400 by taking one of the zuzim. At this point, tough luck. You benefited a little bit. You don't get your investment back, and you're left with nothing basically." So Amrule Rabbana Rabbi Ami. The rabbi said to Rabbi Ami, "What are you talking about, Rabbi Ami? That's only That's only if he eats the shevach, the gains, the profits. But this eating from the 400, he took one zuz from the 400. That was the principle itself. That wasn't like he invested and there was a gain. We're only talking about he invested and received gains. Okay, and most of the commentaries say they were basically telling Rabbi Ami, you didn't understand the case properly. Okay, maybe they didn't tell him the case properly. So comes Rabbi Ami and he says, and you should add the words. Okay, so they say, sorry, it's the karnakacha behotza'ahi. It's just an expense. That one zuz was just added to his expense. They really get an expense of 601 zuz. Okay, one he took from her. He wants his 600 back. He didn't take anything from the proceeds. There were no proceeds, profits. So Amar Lahu, he says to them, again, those words aren't here, but they should be added. Says the Bach, Im Ken, so he says, oh, then I got the case wrong. It must be, this is a good case. You're right. Hotzi, he didn't gain any benefits. He put out money. And yes, he has to swear exactly what it cost him to get there. And he gets all the money back. So now going to the words in the Mishnah that we just read, Yishava kama hotzi, he totally has to swear how much he spent and he gets the money. Amar Rav Asi, this is only if the amount invested is equal to the amount expended. Okay, the amount invested, your expenditures is equal to the amount of profit. Okay, so now, what does that mean? And there are going to be two interpretations of what Rav Asi was trying to say. We know what he means. Okay, so let's give an example. The field was worth 500. He invested 100. The field is now worth 600. Okay, in that case, the profits are equal to the expenditures. So what was he trying to say? So again, this means he swears how much, if it's equal, then he swears, and then he takes it back, right? He takes back the 100. So if he invested 100 and it's worth 100, he takes that. So what is this? What's the relevance of this? Amar Abaye, She'im, what he's trying to say is the other case. What's the other case? And this we're going to have Rav and Abaye disagreeing. She'im haya sheva yeter al hotzah. If the benefits were more than the expenditures, okay, the profits were more than the expenditures. So meaning he put in 500, it was worth 500. He put in 100 and now it's at 650. Okay, it went up by 150. Notel et hotzaah below shvuah. In that case, since he made more money and he's basically leaving the woman with some proceeds because he doesn't get all the proceeds, he takes the hotzaah, he gets his expenses back because this is a case where he didn't benefit at all. So he gets to get his expenses back in full. But without a shvuah, he doesn't even have to swear in this case because why? Well, it's going to be a bit of a question. But it seems that since he's leaving her with profits, so we let him just take what his expenses were. To which Rava says, Amarle Rava, what are you talking about? He could lie. What was the whole point of instituting the swearing? He has to swear because we want to ensure that he's not lying. Now, in this case, let's say he invested 100 and it now went up to 150, up 150 in value. So there's a 50 profit gain, right? There's 150, but really, 50. So what's going to prevent him from lying and saying, as long as he's under, he's going to be able to get his money back? So he'll just say, I invested 130, and then she'll be left with 20. And because of that, he doesn't need to swear, but he could lie. So that doesn't help. So Rava says, can't possibly be that's what Rav Asi meant. So Amarle Rava, Ela Amar Rava, what he meant was, the opposite. What if he invested 100 to this 500 shekel field? He invested 100. Now it's worth 550. It only went up by 50. He basically lost 50 in the deal. Then, ein lo ela hotza'ah shiur shevach ub'shvuah. First of all, Rava for sure says you need to swear. And he has to swear about what? What does he get? Only 50. In other words, you get your hotza'ah back, your expenses back, if your profit matched your expenses. But if your profit was less than the expenses, then you're only going to get the difference back. You're only going to get the 50 back. Okay? And that's what Rav Asi meant when he said, that allows you to collect the money. But of course, you have to swear. Okay, Abaye tried to say you don't even need to swear if it's more. But now he says, no. Right? If your profits were more. This is the reverse case. If your profits are less, you're only going to get the amount of the expenses minus the loss of money in the deal. Now they ask the following question. So we already said that if the husband invests money and he benefits a little bit, he loses, right? When the marriage is off, he basically ended up losing his investment. It goes to the woman. What if he didn't lose the money, but he hired sharecroppers to work the land and invest, and they were supposed to get the percentage back, and then the marriage dissolved, and the sharecroppers had eaten a little bit? Do we say the same halacha for them? Do we say adata de ba'al nachit? They went with the intent, they knew the risk involved. They knew what they were doing, right? They probably got a higher profit margin, because, right? It's their sharecroppers. They only get a certain percentage. So do we say do we think maybe he upped their percentage because they were taking a big risk, because theoretically they might end up with very little? And basically what they arranged with the owner, right? They arranged with, he could only pass on kind of what his rights were, and his rights end at the end of the marriage. And therefore, as soon as he's off the land, right? If he would have lost it, so they lose it as well. Oh, Dilma, or do we say, Adata to Aranachi? No, they took the job connected to the land, not connected to the husband's ownership of this property. But the land is still in existence. It's just owned by the woman now. When they took the job, it was to take the job fully. They're going to work this land and always make a percentage, whether it belongs to the husband or whether it reverts back to the wife. So, Rava bar Rav Nachman, before we even get an answer, he attacks the question, and he says it's such an obvious answer. Why is it any different from if you go into your neighbor's house, he wasn't planting anything, and you go in and you plant a huge garden. So what happens? You did it, and your neighbor didn't give you approval on it. We evaluate how much profit there was, how much you spent, and your hand is on the lower side, meaning whichever one was less, you'll get back. Okay, so if your investment was less money than what you gained, you'll get the investment back. If your investment was higher than your gain, then you'll get your gain back. Okay, but you do get your money back. So obviously the sharecropper should be no different than this. It's like someone who went in Shalom Bereshit because the wife never told him to go. It was the husband who gave him permission. The husband's not the owner anymore. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not a question. It's meaning that doesn't answer our question very obviously, because hatam le'ka'inish jatarach. When you went into your neighbor's field, it was because nobody was planting that field. Hacha ikabal detarach. The woman had a husband who was supposed to deal with the land. He decided to hire someone instead, but he could have been. In other words, so basically she could say, I didn't ask you to come in. My husband would have dealt with this, and then I wouldn't have had this problem, because if it was my husband, I would have all the profits right now and you would get nothing. So it's really a valid question. To which the Gemara says, okay, my Havela, so what's the answer? Amar Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua. So Rav Huna says, the son of Rav Yoshua, Chazina, we check, we assess, we make an assessment based on, or what we look to see. Ibal Arisu, if the husband could have worked the land, he was a farmer type person, an agricultural guy, knew what he was doing, then then she has legitimacy to her claim. I thought my husband was going to deal with it. I didn't ask for you. But if she tries to make that claim and the husband, no way does he know how to work the land, then then the land goes to the aris and he continues to make his profit on it. And she can't say you don't get the profits. Now, in a similar vein, they asked the following question. The husband sells land for the payroll, meaning I have my land, it's my nichsei melog, my inheritance, let's say, and my husband gets to use it while we're married because, again, I don't have rights to my land. which we're going to see now. Why exactly don't I have rights to my land? You're probably wondering. I mean, we did talk about that this was very commonplace in those days. Even we talked about late 1800s in America, even definitely many other places in the world. But the question is, my husband has rights to the profits. Can he sell them to somebody else? So, and from that, we're going to get to what is really the point of the husband having the profits. Mi amrina, do we say, my dekane, akne, whatever he owns, he can sell. So he can sell exactly his rights. He can't sell the land, but he can sell the proceeds while we're married. Odilma, or do we say, kitakino le rabbanan perot lebal, when the rabbis instituted that he get the produce, why did they do that? And now we're going to finally see at least a possible reason as to why, moving now to Amud Bet, mishum revach beita, because we wanted to have more things in the house. We assume, okay, maybe this is a fair or not fair assumption, that the husband knows how to manage a field better than the wife does. It's more his domain, and therefore he'll invest in it, and there'll be wealth in the house. Now, if he sells it, but the rabbis instituted it so that there be more wealth in the house. So he has the property, he can invest in it and hopefully make more money, and the family can live better life. But they can give it to him so he could sell his rights. That's, of course, not why they gave it to him now. It's not, of course, not. It's one side of that question. So Yehuda bar Maremar, Mishmei de Rava Amar, we're going to have two options of what Rava said. Yehuda bar Maremar says that Rava said, Masha Sasu, he can sell it. Rav Papa Amar Mishmei de Rava Lo Asava Lo Klum. Okay, Rav Papa says, some people say it's Rav Papi said in the name of Rava. Okay, that, or Rav Papa, you'll see Rav Papa comes up in a minute, so it's a good question which one really said it. But either way, he said in the name of Rava, this is not a sale. And now Rav Papa comes, and again, if it was Rav Papa who said the second thing, then he's just supporting his own answer. If it was Rav Papi, then he's coming to basically give a proof for Rav Papi. Amar Rav Papa, Hadi Yehuda bar Maremar, La befeiru sheitmar ela michlale itmar. Rav Yehuda bar Maremar saw Rava do something and assumed that he meant that the sale is a good sale, but he misunderstood. And now we're going to hear the story and why he misunderstood. And therefore, the second answer he's going to say is a better answer, that really it's not a good sale. He can't sell it. There was a woman, legavra tarte amata. The wife brought into the marriage two maidservants. Azal gavra nasiv itatachrit. The husband now takes a second wife. What does he do? Well, the maidservants are also property of the woman's, and he has rights to use them as he wishes while they're married. So what does he do? He has a new wife. He gives one of the maidservants to that second wife. Now you can imagine the first wife already was pretty upset that he married a second wife, probably, and now took her maidservant and gave it to the second wife. She was pretty unhappy about this. She goes to Rava and she starts screaming. This is a common occurrence. Again, it's not so many women in the Gemara as it is, so it's not the most common, but you do see often a woman gets to a position where she feels like she's being taken advantage of, and only thing left for her to do is to scream. She's very upset and she screams. Lo eshkachba. He doesn't listen to her, which isn't surprising. Often, right, they'll always tell you, don't scream. If you scream, no one's going to listen to you. This maybe in the Knesset, it actually maybe does work, but generally we try not to scream. It's not a very effective method of communication. So he ignores her. Now, Mandechaza, the one who saw, and that's people who saw him silent, and what did they assume? They assumed that Rava didn't side on her side, and the truth is he didn't. He thought she was in the wrong. The question is, why was she in the wrong? Right? It wasn't just because she was screaming. Right? Because she was screaming, he didn't even respond to her. Right? He could have responded and said, "You're wrong," but he didn't even respond to her because she was screaming. But in any case, he didn't side on her side. Why is that? So Mandechaza, the ones who thought, Savar, they thought, Mishum de Savar, Masha Sa Soy. They must have thought he can sell what he wants, so he can give, right? He can do whatever he wants with it as long as they're married. Right? Obviously, when he dies or divorces her, the maidservant will go right back to her. But right now, it's his to do with what he pleases. But Velohi, that's not true. And that's what Yehuda bar Maremar thought. Mishum revach beita, v'ha karavach. No, it's because it's for the benefit. The whole reason is it's to benefit the household so that there's more wealth in the household. Now, if you sell to some third party, that doesn't work, and you're not allowed to do it. And that's why it supports Rav Papi, or Rav Papa said, which is lo asav lo klum. It's not valid. In this case, it was valid because he was keeping it all in the family. She's still living in the house. That's going to ultimately also benefit, even though she doesn't feel that way. But it will benefit the first wife because there'll be people working in the house still, and it will be for the benefit of the household. So this was a unique case that doesn't indicate anything if you're selling to someone who doesn't belong to the family. The Hilchata, what's the halacha? Baal shemachal karka lepirot, lo asav lo klum. In fact, we paskin that way. It's not a valid sale. What's the reason? My timer. Amar Abaye Amar cheshina shema tachsif. Really, what are we worried about? Abaye says we're worried that if he sells it to somebody else, they might ruin the property. They might do it for the short-term gain, right? Where our whole goal is that the woman get it back and she get it back in a good state. We want to try to keep her property and not destroy it. And we're worried if you sell it to somebody else, they might not care about the principle because, again, all they have is payroll. At least when he's married to her, you figure he has, he wants it to be good for his wife ultimately, so he does it in a way that's good long-term. But in this case, he sells it to some other party. What do they care about the woman? Rava Amar Mishum Rab Beta, like we saw, because we want to keep it in the household and benefit the household. My benayu, what's the difference, la halacha, between that? Ika benayu, we have three cases. First two go in one category, the third goes a different direction. Ara de mikarav lamata, if it's land near the city, then they'll see it often and they'll be able to watch and make sure that he's not planting it too much or treating it badly for the long term. Inami bal arisu. Many different interpretations what this means. We'll go with Rashi. He says, for example, if the husband works in the land, what he sold, payroll, what he sold was not the rights to work in the land. What he said is, I'll work the land and I'll give you the proceeds. So then he's working the land and he's just giving the proceeds to the other person. Then we don't have to worry that it's going to ruin the land, but neither of these are good for Rav Chabeta because all the proceeds are going to somebody else. Inami, this is going to be the other direction. Zuze v'ka'avibu iska. What he gave him in exchange wasn't, let's say, food, which he's just going to eat, but he gave him in exchange money, which he could then invest in something else and make profits off of it. Then, and it's not like he was desperate for money and needed it for food and clothing and all that, and it was just going to get spent. No, he got money in order to invest, and then it's l'Rav Chabeta. He can then invest and make profit for his family. It will be good for his family, but it won't help us with the concern that the property is going to diminish in value ultimately. Okay, new Mishnah. This is a Mishnah we actually saw in Yavamot already. Shomeret yabam. We're going to go back to this woman, okay, as opposed to before we discussed the arusa. Okay, that was in one of the earlier Mishnayot about the arusa, and a betrothed woman, just so recently, that ends up during the betrothal, she inherits money. This is a woman who's shomeret yabam. She's different from a betrothed woman because a betrothed woman is about to get married. A shomeret yabam who's supposed to do yibum, her husband dies, she's supposed to marry the brother. She doesn't know, right? Maybe she'll get married to him, maybe she'll do chalitza. She's at a bit of a different stage. So naflula nechasim, now she inherits money. Modim Beit Shamai Beit Hillel. In this case, they don't have a machloket. They both agree shemocheret v'notenet v'kayam. She has all rights to sell her property. He doesn't have any rights to her nichsei melog. Meta. What if she dies? Ma yasu b'ktubata. What do they do with the 200 zuz, the extra, the tosefet, if there is, with the nichsei tzom barzel, the ones that he commits, I'll give you back this value at the end. Those are the melog, the ones that come in and out with her, meaning she gets them, right, even if they've devaluated, or even if they've depreciated, or if they've gone up in value, she gets them as they are, whenever the marriage ends. So all those things, Beit Shamai omrim, Yachleku Yorshei Abal im Yorshei Av. They split them, okay? They split them 50-50. It's actually a debate about whether he's only talking about in Yavamot. They basically say he's really only talking about the nichsei melog here. He's not referring to the beginning of the question about the ketuba money. This doesn't make sense that the father has any rights to that. So anyway, Beit Shammai is explained to be talking about only the nichsei melog, which is why the father has some part of the claim and also the yabam has part of the claim. Beit Hillel obrim, and this line also is interpreted in two different ways. Nichasim, okay, we'll read it the first way. The way Rashi reads is if there's three things here. Nichasim b'ches katan. Nichasim, which are the nichsei tzom barzel, stay in whoever's hands they're in right now, which is very unclear. And if you go with Rashi, this means the nichsei tzom barzel, they stay in the hands of whoever they're in. It's a debate about whose hands are they in right now. Ketuba b'chizkat yorshei haba'al, the ketuba money, the 200 zuz and the extra tosefet that he might have promised her, all goes to the inheritors of her husband. And right, we're talking about the first ketuba because she was basically married. She then was waiting to do yibum, and the nichsei yotzim ima, whatever nichsei melog she had, well, that goes b'chizkat yorshei ha'ab because it came from their house really, more theirs than anyone else's. That's Rashi. Tosfot says that's the nichsaim b'chizkatan is actually the intro. It's like a topic sentence. The nichsaim stay wherever they are. One, ketuba, which is the 200 zuz, the 100 zuz, and the nichsei and the tosefet, and the nichsei tzom barzel, which basically the husband gets to keep. He just has to return the value of them the way they were at the beginning of the marriage. That all is b'chizkat yorshei haba'al. So that's really in the husband's hands. So he keeps that. And the nichsei melog are basically in the father's hands, and he keeps that. And the nichsaim b'chizkatan is just describing those next two laws. So either there's 3 cases here, or there's 2 cases, and that's just a topic sentence. Next. Now we have a different case. You have to assume that we're talking about if before she was a shomer yabam, now she actually marries him. If you remember, when the yabam marries the wife, the first wife of his brother, he inherits the brother's estate. But now what's the problem? The problem is, if you remember, he doesn't give her a new ketuba. Her ketuba is still on the first husband's ketuba. So that means that all the first husband's property is liened to her ketuba. So he can't actually sell any of it, okay? He has rights to the proceeds of it, but he can't sell it because it's really liened to her ketuba. Until he pays the ketuba, which is only going to be after divorce or death, the rest of the property of the brothers is untouchable for him. Again, touchable for the purposes of investing, but untouchable in terms of selling it. So, or he could sell it, but it'll have a lien on it. What if he left him money? Okay, Rashi tells us at the end of the Dibor Matchil, which is going to be the next words. He says this Tana holds mital tele mishtabde the ketuba. We saw that before that really the woman would generally take her ketuba from the land, and that she could only take it from the land, but there is an opinion that she could take it from mital telin, and in fact the Gaonim eventually brought this opinion back. And this Mishnah holds that way because otherwise there wouldn't be a conversation here about movable property. So if it was money, and we're going to see if it's fruits, movable property, since it's lien to ketuba, so what do we do so that he can actually use it? Because if he uses the fruits or the money, right, it'll be gone. He can't do that. He doesn't have rights to it. It's lien to her property. So you turn it into, you buy land with it, then she'll eventually end up with the land, and he in the meantime can get the proceeds. If there were fruits that were detached from the ground, same thing. And even the same thing for mechubarim b'karka, even things that are attached to the ground, there's going to be a debate. Amar Rabbi Meir, shamin otam kamim yafim b'perot, v'kamim yafim below perot. You can't take them to the shuk, but you can evaluate the value of the field with the fruits. You can say, what would this field be worth without the fruits? The difference between them, hamotal, the difference, yilakach be'em karka b'ochel perot, that must be the value of the fruits, and therefore he buys land with that, and he can get proceeds from that. Chachamim omri perot mechubarim b'karka shelo. Land, stuff that's attached to the ground is his, which the Gemara is going to say, what on earth are you talking about? How could they be his? It's all the more so it's hers, because if they're attached to the ground, they're like the ground, and the ground is hers. He doesn't have rights to sell it. It's lien to her ketuba. We'll leave that till we get later to the Gemara. Hatlushim min akarka. And the hatlushim min akarka, anything that's attached from the ground, kol hakodem zachaben. He disagrees also with that halacha. He says, whoever, now the chachamim hold, like I said before, which is only land is lien, not movable property. So any movable property, like detached fruits, whoever takes them, takes them. They don't really belong to either one of them, or they belong to maybe both of them. Kadam hu zacha, kadmahi lakach bem karka v'uchel perot. He gets them first, he gets them. If she takes them first, again, they don't really hers because anything she owns is really her husband's. So again, you turn it into land, and then, right, and again, this isn't even hers yet. It's just her ketuba's lien to it. So you turn it into land, he could eat proceeds, and eventually she could take it for her ketuba money at the end of the marriage. Mishnah continues, Knasa, when he marries her, she becomes his wife for all intents and purposes. When the yabam marries her, she's basically, it's like they're a regular married couple. Bilvad, other than one thing, should take ketubata on nichsei balarish. That's what we just said. Her ketuba is from the first husband. He doesn't give her a ketuba. Lo yomarla, he can't say to her, Hare ketubatech munach al shulchan. Here, this is some stuff. Take your ketuba money from here, not from anything else, and that's going to free up all of his brother's property, and now he can do whatever he wants with it. No, ela kol nechasav, all his brother's property, achra'im l'ktubata, is linked to her ketuba. V'chein, and likewise, by the way, this isn't just for yibum. Lo yomar adam lishto, in a regular marriage, so a man can't say to his wife, Hare ketubatech munach al shulchan. Here, take your ketuba from here. Can't do that. Ela kol nechasav achra'im l'ktubata. All of his property is linked to the ketuba. So again, that means nothing is free for him. Anything he sells could be liened. Someone could claim it, right? She could claim it when she goes to get her ketuba money. He'll have to reimburse them the money, right? It'll be a big balagan for him. Girsha, if he divorces her, now we're back to the yabam, ein la ela ketuba. All she gets is the ketuba, okay, which is going to mean she's left with the ketuba of her first husband. Again, there's a few different ways to understand this Mishnah. Okay, when he divorced her, he's supposed to give her the ketuba then, of the first husband. Okay, and then, by the way, what does it mean, ein la ketuba? After that, then he has access to all the other brothers, and that frees him up from getting all the brothers' property, basically. Okay, so then, if, one second, I want to check one thing. Okay, so anyway, just one second, I'll try to do it while I say it, but if, yeah, okay. Now, if he remarries her, she's like every other woman. Now, here there's a debate about how to read this, but we'll read it one way, which is ein la ela ketuba bilvad. What it means is, if in the time they were divorced, before they remarried, he didn't pay her the ketuba from the first husband, then we just revert back to the way it was in the original marriage, and basically he has no access to the brother's property. Now they ask the following question. Yabam shemeta mikova. Who, again, we talk about, the Mishnah started off with her money, right? Some of it, if she dies, we don't know who the money goes to, who inherits. He inherits part, right? There's like part ownership of all the property. So if you remember, kfula is in place of the fact that he inherits, and because of that, he needs to bury her. Well, now that she's not married and she's also not at home anymore, she's in between. Who buries her? Yorshe habal kavrela to kayarte ketuba. They inherit the ketuba, so do they have to do the burial? Oh, Dilma Yorshe av kavrela, or maybe her father's family has to bury her to kayarte nichsei nichsei because they inherit the nichsei melog. So the question is, which one is in place of the burial, the right that she gets rights? Someone's going to, the husband's going to bury her. Who basically takes on that right when her husband dies without kids, and now she's in between stage, supposed to marry the yabam, but isn't really back at her home, and each one inherits a different part. So which one is in place of the burial? With that, we'll finish today's class. Have a Shabbat Shalom.